for this next session to bring to you both Rob Dixon, Lisa Franklin, to talk to you about this topic. And first up, we have Rob Dixon, Director of Economic and Community Development at Ameren, Missouri. In this role, he leads the strategy and implementation of Ameren's efforts to help drive economic growth in the partnership with the communities they serve. Prior to joining Ameren, Rob served in Missouri Governor Mike Parson's cabinet, leading the State Department of Economic Development. You heard him reference before. Appreciate all your work in that area. And following Rob, we're going to have Lisa Franklin. Lisa is the lead economic development manager at Evergy. Lisa is a recognized leader in economic development with more than 33 years of experience providing a value to economic development organizations as well as those communities, both as a practitioner and a consultant. She's frequently called upon to provide innovative solutions for economic development organizations to improve the overall effectiveness of their program and technology-led initiatives. As a lead economic development manager for Evergy, Lisa's primary responsibility is managing the local partner investment program and managing the Local One information system, LOIS, an economic development site selection application that has grown rapidly over the last few years and now serves more than 10,000 communities across nearly 40 states, including Mexico. So thank you both for being here. Rob, you're up first.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. And I'll start off with a quick disclaimer. I joined the call here in live stream when John Deal was talking, and the first thing I heard him was say my name. So that's a really kind of eerie feeling when you join a conference call and hear somebody talking about you. But I think the two speakers we just heard from really is a perfect lead-in for the topic that Lisa and I are going to address, and that's how energy policy, economic development really kind of intertwine. And those success stories that you just heard from, I think, are a direct result of some of the important public policy decisions and changes that were made in Missouri over the last few years to help make some of that possible. And I'll talk a little bit today about our smart energy plan and how that's really driving economic development success across our state. And so I'll also just step back before I get into it, if I could. I'm 30 days now into my role at Ameren. And so I hope you save all the technical questions for Lisa, who this is a special moment for me actually to be on a panel with Lisa, especially as I am very new to my career at Ameren and in the energy industry. But obviously I've worked in economic development for my entire career. But Lisa is somebody that has really just been a fixture in economic development in Missouri, whether it was about a utility related issue or just economic development broadly speaking. So it's a real honor to be on a panel with you, Lisa, and to really kind of start my economic development utility career in a conversation with you. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I'm really excited about kind of this topic in general. And that's really what I think brought me to be excited about coming to Ameren in the first place, was how intertwined our state's energy policies and our state's energy opportunities are to really provide opportunities for Missouri communities and Missouri citizens and certainly our customers to grow and prosper. And so there's a lot of good things ahead. I think there's some important decisions that we as a state are going to have to make in order to take advantage of it. But the opportunity is there for us. So if you could advance the slide for me just a second, Josh, I'd appreciate it. Just a real high level starting point here. I know a lot of the folks on this call certainly know Ameren and know who we are as a company, but just to give you a little bit of a sense of perspective, of course, we're our state's largest investor-owned utility, a Fortune 500 company providing electric and gas. Our corporate headquarters is in St. Louis, but if you go to the next slide, I think you can really see the footprint that we have across not just Missouri, but certainly Illinois. And as we think about the interconnectedness of our economies, I think this is a really important point. Of course, in Illinois, we serve kind of the southern 2/3 of the state. And then on the Missouri side, of course, roughly the central to eastern half of our state from the Boot Heel up to the Iowa border. I want to point out on the left kind of our generation portfolio. And I know many of the folks on this call are familiar with this from kind of a policy perspective and an understanding of our industry. But what's really important here from an economic development perspective is the diversity of our energy portfolio. And as you just heard, a really great example of multinational companies from around the world who are looking at investing in Missouri. And an important part of the decision-making process that they're looking at is the reliability, the affordability, but certainly how energy companies are looking at providing that clean and renewable source. And so obviously our portfolio includes everything from wind to nuclear to hydro, and of course to our kind of legacy generation opportunities. So in terms of economic development, this is really important, and it's really, I think, kind of ties into the results of the Smart Energy Plan. If you can go to the next slide, please. So many of the folks on this call were really involved with some of the discussions a few years ago as the Smart Energy Plan was passed in the Missouri General Assembly and put into law, and certainly since then put into practice across the state of Missouri as construction projects are happening all across our state. I won't go through this line by line, but I really just want to highlight the fact that investments are happening. We're already making significant progress in a variety of ways. And then specific to our economic development perspective, some things that I really want to highlight, and we'll talk about kind of companies that are expanding and growing here, but the Smart Energy Plan has really helped provide opportunities for kind of the broader supply chain across our state, for small businesses, for suppliers across Missouri, and over half of the suppliers that are helping complete these projects and supply the materials for them and get the work done. Over half of them are Missouri-based small businesses and others. And so this is a really important data point for us, because I think it really highlights the fact that our Smart Energy Plan is not just helping companies like you just heard from grow in their individual decisions, but we're also having truly a broad-based economic impact on the state, and not the least of which, of course, is the actual infrastructure development. And then we'll talk a little bit about the results of that from a company perspective, or a business by business perspective on economic development projects. You can go to the next slide, please. Just to give you a real quick snapshot of some of the investments that have been made already and some of the investments that are being planned through the Smart Energy Plan to really help ensure that our grid continues to be exactly what we need it to be. So you can see the investments that have made, again, in substations, in the grid itself, in our upgrades to our cable system, and then certainly to overall hardening. And now I'll tell you, this is coming from a 30-day veteran of the energy industry here, so I don't pretend to have any degree of technical expertise on this, but you heard directly from a company that has just made two significant expansion investments in Missouri, creating hundreds of jobs. Swift Foods in particular is investing hundreds of millions of dollars in two different Missouri communities. And these are some of the things that they were thinking about as they were making their location decisions. So they don't often get the really headline kind of analysis that you think in the news when people talk about the ribbon cuttings and the groundbreaking ceremonies that we like to celebrate in economic development. But these are a lot of the things that go into the fact that the considerations on that front end when those companies are trying to decide where to locate. And that's basically, is the location that they're considering making those important investments for the future? And I think the Smart Energy Plan has really allowed us to move forward on that in our state. If you can go to the next slide, please. We'll get a little bit more drilled down here into the economic development impacts. Specifically, a part of the Smart Energy Plan, of course, was an economic development incentive rider, which really allowed us to offer average of discounted rates on qualifying new businesses. And so it's certainly available for companies that are in that, the industrial and commercial sector, that are creating jobs, that are adding to our state's economy, that are working with our economic development partners, that are adding and sustaining certain load and demand requirements, throughout the year. So obviously this has a really positive effect, not just on the economy, but on other customers and ratepayers across the system. And so it's really an important tool for a variety of reasons. But the bottom line message is that it's working to help drive economic development. And you heard a great case study from Swift Foods in particular, but these are just a snapshot of the companies that we've worked with over the years. I'm in a kind of a unique opportunity or unique moment where I was able to work with these companies in my role at the state, and also now to kind of see the impact that Ameren, Missouri, and our economic development incentive rider has had on the decision-making process for them. And it's really impressive to kind of see how this fit together. The thing I want to highlight here is that this is a program, the rider itself is something that we're really proud of because we think it helps increase Missouri's competitiveness. And as you know, some of the work that's been happening over the last few years in Missouri has been to really reassess our state's competitiveness for economic development. And just frankly, other states were passing us by in many categories. And so there's been a variety of public policy changes and strategy changes in economic development to make us more competitive. And this is one of the key components of that, in my opinion. And as we think about the future, if we as a state are going to continue to be competitive, continue to help our communities grow, and continue to help provide opportunities for our citizens and residents and neighbors and customers to grow and prosper themselves, we're going to have to continue to stay ahead of that game. And so I know you'll hear over the next day or two from some of our coworkers at Ameren about some of these other components of our smart energy plan. But this is a really important one that anybody that's involved in economic development needs to be thinking about, is how do we build this policy out for the future? How do we make a really important economic development tool even better? And there'll be some discussions happening, of course, on that in the legislature over the coming year. The bottom line is this program is working, and it's helping to provide opportunities in rural areas, in our urban and suburban areas. It's helping large businesses and small businesses, and the results are really speaking for themselves, and we're proud of it, and we want to see that success continue. And if you can go to my last slide, please. Get a little bit more drilled down into what some of those results were. And so just in the last year alone, our economic development incentive riders helped us drive results in our communities that we serve. We've been fortunate to announce over 22 projects. Those are companies, and we say projects in economic development, of course, we mean a business that is in an active expansion, relocation type of a decision-making process. And we were able to work with 22 of them over the last year alone. This is just 1 year kind of snapshot. Over 3,000 jobs, nearly $1 billion in new capital investment. And we're really excited about what that means, of course, for those communities, but also you can see the impact on our energy system itself and what that means for our customers. And I think this is a really important concept here, that the Economic Development Incentive Program is not just kind of an incentive tool that helps individual businesses in their expansions, which it does, but it also provides benefits, of course, to the broader state and to all of our customers. In terms of the future, economic development is one of those fields where it's always, what have you done for me lately? And great about that ribbon cutting we had yesterday, but what's next? And so as we think about the pipeline looking ahead, we see some really strong activity in kind of the core industries in Missouri. And 2/3 of our active pipeline is really focused in on those top industries that you see in that bottom left. Advanced manufacturing, really powered, of course, by the automotive industry right now, and some of the opportunities that are happening across the supply chain and automotive as they think about the future of their industry as it relates to electrification. Of course, aerospace defense, food production, you just heard from a great example of that, and then of course data centers. So that's really the core of our project activity pipeline as we look at potential opportunities ahead. And so we're excited about those. We're going to continue to drive on them. But if you think about Missouri's economy, this is it in a nutshell. This list right here really encapsulates so much of our state's economy. And if you think about that growth, then you know that we're going to need to continue to stay competitive in our core industries for our state. And that's really where that economic development incentive rider comes in. So final comment for me, and this is, again, reflective of where I'm at here, transitioning from my old role to my new role. But one of the things that I was really thinking about or as I made this transition is just how transformative a moment we're facing right now in our state, in our economy, really the entirety of, not to be too hyperbolic about it here, but everything we know, I think, is on the cusp of transformative change. Economically, socially, politically, you name it, there's so much happening around us. Pandemic aside, this is an opportunity for, I think, that we're going to look back on, and we're going to see kind of a before and after moment when we look at the history books here. And so how we approach energy policy today, how we approach economic development policy today is really going to impact the future of our state's economy, and certainly as it relates to the national economy as well. So the foundations of our economic development strategy across the state really tie into infrastructure development and workforce development for obvious reasons. as we think about strategies for economic development. How are we working with businesses and industries as they're going through such disruptive and transformative change? The automotive industry, I think, is a perfect example of how we as a state really need to be thinking about how do we help grow the automotive sector? How do we help them adapt to the changes? How do we help them take advantage of opportunities? And frankly, from an energy perspective, how do we help them take advantage of those opportunities that are out there now and that will be coming? And then finally, of course, anybody that follows the news knows that there's billions and billions of dollars of federal funds coming to the state and to communities all across Missouri and certainly within our territory, our service territory. And we need to be thinking now about how do we capitalize on some of those to drive economic development going forward. So I'm going to stop there, Josh, and look forward to plugging back in our Q&A time. But thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about how our smart energy plan is driving growth. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. It's all up to you now.
Very good. Thank you, Josh, for the introduction. And thank you for the nice comments, Rob. It's always a pleasure working with you on economic development projects throughout the state of Missouri. Good morning, everyone. I really do appreciate the opportunity to present to you today about Evergy's economic development program, followed up by a case study to show you the process we went through to locate a new industry in our service territory. So next slide. First, here's an overview of Evergy. I just thought it'd be a good idea to give you some idea of our footprint in the state of Kansas and the state of Missouri. As you can see here from the map, we have 1.6 million customers. We have 5,000 employees, 51,000 miles of power lines, and we're generating 13 megawatt of energy. I think that's important to know. We do work both sides of in both states. And I think I can just tell you, it's really about 50-50 as it relates to project success. If you look below, there is a chart illustrating our generation portfolio mix. In 2020, 40% of our energy was generated from coal, followed by natural gas and wind. But if you look over to 2040, our portfolio will look very different. Coal will be reduced to roughly 7%, with wind being the #1 source. I'll talk to you a little bit later about how that plays into the economic development recruitment process. Next slide. Let me introduce you to the Evergy Economic Development Team. We have 4 full-time economic development professionals that work in both states. 3 of our members have over 30 years of experience in the profession. We are one of 2 utilities in the United States and Canada that have earned the Economic Development Organization accreditation from the International Economic Development Council. We have held that accreditation for 5 years now. Our team was selected by Site Selection Magazine in 2021 as one of the top 20 utilities in the country doing economic development. And last, I want to point you down to our mission. We really do economic development from a 2-pronged approach. We really work on community competitiveness, and we also work obviously on the recruitment side. We help our communities, our local economic developers actually land the projects when they come to the community for their site visits. But I think I want to point that out because our local partner programs is very strong part of what we do at the Evergy Economic Development and our team to really make things happen. Next slide. I know Rob showed you a snapshot of their projects. This is a snapshot of Evergy's 2021 site selection portfolio. Right now, we have 47 active projects in our portfolio. Now, we're not working on 47 at one time, but at any given time, we might be working on them. And I will say, just not our economic development team. Anytime you work a project internally, you're pulling in all of your resources, like your planning engineers, your transmission, your regulatory, your leadership team. So there's quite a few resources that we need and a lot of hours put into these projects. But of that, and in 2021, we've already landed 18 economic development projects. That represents 26 million in new revenue, 53 in new demand in megawatts. We have roughly 2,000 jobs, and that represents about $1 billion new investment. And then we measure ourselves in total economic impact, and that's really a calculation that involves revenue, new jobs, new investments, some regional multipliers. But year over year, we look at that total economic impact and how we're actually performing in the marketplace. I will say this, the new revenue, the new demand, and the economic impact, that's year over year. Once we land a company, that's going to happen next year, the year after, as long as they're doing business in our service territory. And then if you look to the right there, you will see that, and we get asked this a lot, where's our project activity coming from? Well, you can see here this year, we had 8 coming from the manufacturing sector, 3 from data centers, 2 from food processing. And those are really year over year. That's just about the map that we see each and every year as it relates to project activity. Manufacturing is always leading in our service territory. Next slide. A case study I want to take you through. This actually was a 2020 project win. And the reason I'm sharing this with you today, this was one that I was deeply engaged in, and I'm very proud of, and I wanted to share it with you so you can have an understanding of how we work projects. This happens to be Project Apofiki. It was a logistics project, 1,600 new jobs, 109 million in new investment. The new demand for this project was a 570 kW, with a 24/7 operation, and obviously they needed 400,000 square feet. And our competition was Memphis and Columbus. And to really set this up, in 2017-18 timeframe, we were contacted by the community that landed the project. They really wanted to get more involved in the site selection recruitment process to grow their industry base. They really hadn't had much success over the past 15 years recruiting industry, and they are certainly a part of a large metro area that was growing. Just starting there, our team conducted, and I say the Evergy Economic Development team, along with the city, conducted a competitive analysis to determine what they needed to position themselves to be competitive globally. I think this may be where we're a little bit different at Evergy. And to kind of give you a better understanding of that, this analysis, and as it relates to the competitive analysis, it's like putting your house in the market. You know you have some major issues that need to be resolved before you can successfully sell it. Well, this is the outcome personally. I mean, this is what we do. We go in, we assess it, we see what their needs are, and then we deliver on those needs. And so, next slide. This is the process that we went through after we did the competitive analysis. We knew that there was some gaps in making them competitive. So our team, and it involves some investments, we call them our local partner programs, but we went through all of these steps to support the community, so they were basically site ready. They were, at the time when they contacted us, they were not submitting any RFIs. They had land sites, but they were not planned. They did not know exactly what their infrastructure needs were relating to utilities, transportation, et cetera. So I'm just going to walk you through it because I think it's important to know the kind of things that happen before a project even arrives at your doorstep. We went through after the competitive assessment, we performed a site identification study. And what that was us going out and helping them locate a site where an industry would actually want to locate. And this happened to be on a major interstate. After that was done, we went through a site due diligence analysis, and that was a research project that allowed us to look at all of the infrastructure needs, whether it was electric, gas, water, sewer, and it also was an opportunity for us to learn if there were anything that was going to blow up the project. And we've had that happen where we found that there were gas lines, for example, underneath an industrial park, but we wanted to really shake all that out to make sure that we had a good site to promote to prospects. And then after that, we went through a labor force analysis. There was a need for the community to understand their availability and the skill set that they had available to offer to a prospect. So we performed that particular report, and we produced that report for them, and they had that available to them when the project actually arrived at their doorstep. And then obviously they had not worked a project in years, so we went through multiple site selection project practice, we call them mock visits. But we actually had we hired a site selector to come on site and actually go through the whole realm of actually working a project. And that was very helpful to them because they were able to work out all the kinks before the project actually, before they actually got a project. It's certainly not a good time to make mistakes when you have the project in hand. So we worked through a lot of those issues. And then because we were in the pandemic time frame, we actually created a site video, and that was used, and we sent that back to some of the individuals who could not attend and be on site, and they were able to see the entire land site and all the attributes that it was offering. And then last, we did some economic development basic training for city officials. They hadn't done economic development, so there was some alignment needs, and they needed to understand incentives. So we helped them put together an incentive policy, as well as really help them get an alignment of what type of industries that they wanted to recruit. Having said all that, you know, after all that was done and they started marketing the site, it garnered attention from a national developer who brought Project Apofiki to them. And the really exciting thing about this, and this is where I get excited, they no longer had those barriers that they had in previous years where they said, well, we can't recruit this industry because A, B, and C. And so I think that's important for everybody to understand. And it's more than just working a project on the day it comes to town and being there to answer questions. There's a lot of pre-work that comes into making our communities competitive, and that's where Evergy comes to the table. We offer mentoring, consulting, and then we do have an investment pool that we can pull from to what we call them local partner programs, where we share in costs and doing all these things that are on that list. This is just one community. If you can think about working 2 states, we really do try to prioritize those investments and try to make each and every one of our communities as competitive as they can be. And that means when, like I said, when the project comes, we are prepared. Next slide. Once we've done that, and in fact, I just want to walk you through this project. One of my other colleagues actually worked the deal as it relates to being on site for the visit. But once we had the project, our team actually puts together the site infrastructure analysis. And that's just done to determine the cost and how we're going to serve that project based on their projected load. So even though we've done some of the analysis early on when we did the site due diligence, you really have to take another look at it when you know, when the project provides their load to make certain you can serve it in a particular time frame. And that's really important because when companies are looking to establish a new location, their time frames sometimes do not match up with our time frames as it relates to delivery if it's a very large load. We performed that particular analysis and provided that as part of the proposal, as well as a rate analysis. Here again, these two items take a lot of internal resources from our planning engineers, regulatory, and transmission. And then, of course, we were asked to provide an energy incentive. And in this case, we provided the limited large EDR, and we were able to do that because of their KW was over 300. And then, of course, my colleague participated as a member of the local team. The company came in on several occasions, and we had someone on our team that was there to address any questions they had related to the electric energy package. So saying all that, you know, getting them there and then performing when they're actually on site, I mean, that's really the second phase. So you can kind of see how our mission is working, you know, the mission that we put in place by doing all the pre-work and then actually working the project once it's, you know, in the community, you know, our role in the project. That doesn't mean there's other entities that are at the table too. You have the, like Rob said, you have the State Economic Development Department, the Regional Economic Development Department, the locals, and all of the utilities. But it takes everybody to pull in a deal. This is not a one-man band. It really does take everybody to be on their A game and put their best foot forward, because these projects that we work today are very competitive. And you know, if we're not able to deliver, for example, in a time frame in which the client needs, that could jeopardize a project. So we like to do a lot of pre-work so we avoid those kind of issues, believe it or not. So a lot of people think that it just happens, that people find a site and they look at it and we're able to serve, but there's a lot of work that actually goes into that. Next slide. I just wanted to share this because Rob talked a little bit about it earlier, but these are really what we consider our incentives that we have to offer at Evergy. We have our standard economic development rider, which is about a 20% discount over 5 years for the client. They do have a 55% load factor, but if they don't reach that, if they have, there's something in there, I think that says something that they have a certain number of employees, then they can continue taking that particular discount. I don't know exactly the number of jobs. I should know that. But and then of course the limited large, which is the 300 over greater than 300 kW, and that really is about a 40% discount over a 5-year period. So if you look at a company's energy use and you apply these discounts, it can be in the millions of dollars. This is a real incentive to companies. And so we're appreciative of having those incentives in our portfolio to help our communities compete for these projects. And then of course we have an infrastructure revenue justification. And this was important to us as well, because if you have infrastructure needs and it's going to cost $1 million, our company will pay 80% of those costs based on the revenue, and we call that our revenue justification. So we're not putting that on the back of the prospect. Hopefully, getting that energy there, and then we're able to serve them. And then, of course, we always like to introduce our energy efficiency team to the company because there's a lot of opportunities there and savings for all types of programs. And so we make that a part of our economic development proposal from Evergy. Next slide. One of the things I wanted to, this is my last slide, one of the things I wanted to mention, and I think this is really becoming more and more prevalent in about every deal that we work. Most recently, in fact, you can see here just from the numbers, right now we have 2 projects that we're working, and the combined megawatts is 500, where each of them are about 250 megawatts. Those are very, very large projects. And 10 years ago, we would never see anything that's large. But today, it's like everything that's coming through the door happens to be very large projects. And so that's becoming a big issue for us because we're having to build out infrastructure to meet those demands. And so that's taking a lot of internal time, trying to figure out rates, trying to figure out how we're going to serve. The companies usually want this to happen in, for example, 9 to 12 months. And we're really more on a time frame of 18 months. So we're trying to really get a better understanding how we can meet the demands of these companies that have such a large usage to be able to land them because our communities are frustrated if we're not able to come to the table and fulfill those needs. Everything else can be in alignment, but they have to have the electricity. So that's something that's on our plates, and we're trying to determine best practices for handling those, but it's something that we're seeing every day. So that is a trend, and I think it's coming from the data center activity and the cryptocurrency industry. And then I mentioned this earlier in my slide deck. We are seeing companies that are requesting and requiring us to have, they want to consume their energy from renewables. So they may come to us and say, okay, 5% of the energy that you provide to us has to be from a renewable. So that's important to us. And as that changes from, from our energy plan, you can see how we were moving to more green energy sources. I think that's going to be a lot easier to do. So that's a good thing. And then I just wanted to mention this too, because I know that I've kind of mentioned it throughout the presentation, but even though we're landing deals, it's just not the economic development team. We're grateful for that. We have wonderful planning engineers, transmission, regulatory staff that really help us through these projects and are able to be on call basically, because when these projects come to town, we have to be able to respond to them. And it takes all of us to make that happen. And I will tell you this because I did talk to you about Project Apofiki, but that was the Chewy project in Belton. And we have a great relationship with that community, and they are continuing to grow and expand there. So I think Rob was a part of that as well. So that is, I wanted to take you through that project because I think it's a typical project that you might see that we would handle through our economic development team. And I think hopefully through what we have in the future, there'll be even better ways of serving our customers based on their high usage of electricity. So I'm going to leave it at that, and then I guess we'll open it up for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. Lots of great stuff going on, both in Ameren and Evergy, and I know throughout the state, but it was a great example there. One thing that I know we touched on during our pre-call, but you had just mentioned it as well, is when, and Rob, you have this experience and you're going to be able to wear both hats here as DED director and working with Ameren and the utility perspective. But when a new company is coming in, and as you had put it, Lisa, is looking for a large, both swath of land, but also a large demand. You had mentioned that trying to get them the infrastructure in their timeline has been problematic. Is this, they're all looking in the outskirts of your delivery area, or are they even say downtown Kansas City, but you're just not set up to deliver that? Is it a geography thing, or is it something else that is causing that? Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's both. It just depends on the site, and we have to take every site and actually do the analysis to determine if we have the capacity to serve on that site. And if not, we have to build out the infrastructure. Here again, we're trying to do a little bit better job of working with our communities to find best sites. So when we do have the large data centers, for example, that are looking to locate, that we drive them to sites where we actually have the capacity to serve. But these are very, very large. And so it does take time, you know, for us to deliver the infrastructure that we need to actually serve them. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. I think we just have to take it's site specific, really. And it's hard when a community brings the project to you. You got to work with the community. So, you know, you can't take it elsewhere. So especially if it's sourced locally, you got to try to work with them locally to try to serve the customer.
Right. Yeah, and for some of the kind of the large scale, mega scale type attraction projects that are happening across the country right now, I think we have to remember dirt is not a site in economic development. We've got a lot of land available, but it's got to have the infrastructure in place in a very short period of time in order for those companies to get to market quickly, because that's what's really driving it. It's not that, you know, they're anxious or whatever to get their construction done, is that they have goals to get their product or service to market in a very short period of time. And so the infrastructure has to be in place in order to take advantage of that. But it's not just infrastructure. I mean, so the site has to have it in place. It has to have the proximity to workforce. It has to have permitting and other kind of issues already sorted out. It has to have all of those kind of other things that would go into a site selection decision in place. And you really need to have those questions answered in advance. And there's an old saying in economic development that prepared communities win. And it's because you have to have that site ready, the workforce ready, the permits ready, the incentive programs ready, the public policies ready. And if you don't have them in place when the deal knocks on your door, you're probably going to be crossed off the list in the first place.
So that's interesting when you talk about prepared communities. Is there a policy or an action that the state or the local community or the utility should be making? I mean, Rob, you have the perspective of being in the state, and you go, I wish I could have done this. I wish the legislature would have let me do this. Or now that you're their hat, you could have been saying, I wish the utility would have done this. And now you're like, hey, now I can do this. Is there any wish or shoulds out there that you can share with us to make this or make Missouri more successful when these come down, other than just being prepared? Is there a policy or process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold. One is from a very broad-based public policy perspective, we're going to have to make some decisions for the future. Things like, what are we as the state going to do about the smart energy plan for the future? How are we going to address those kind of, really high level public policies? And, if we don't make those decisions today, the opportunities that are going to be presented in the future are going to be reduced significantly. So from a very high level, this isn't just kind of a wishful thinking or maybe someday we should get to it. I mean, there's bills being filed right now. There's opportunities to do it. And I think, if we're going to have a hard look at our economic development success, we're going to have to really have those important conversations about the future of smart energy plan and things like that. From a more localized perspective, and this is kind of what we're doing within our economic development strategy within Ameren, but really looking at how do we work with communities to answer all of those questions about sites. So, Lisa had the great list of kind of those details about sites. Where are they? What are the infrastructure gaps? How are you marketing them? How are you making sure that there's a labor availability plan around the workforce training plan around them? So, how do you focus on those kind of things and as we go forward? And that's what we're really looking at for our community as well.
Lisa, go.
And I will tell you this, Rob is right. Those are communities that are prepared are the ones winning. Those that are not, that's the ones that we are really trying to work with to make them competitive. So we're fortunate to have the local partner investment program at Evergy to be able to, financially invest in these communities to make them, attractive to customers, to companies.
So I have one more question. There are two small ones, I think, from the audience. But Lisa, you're unique in that you, especially now, Evergy is delivering large portions of energy and interacting with a large number of communities in both Kansas City and Missouri. Is Kansas doing anything different than Missouri that you like better and think Missouri should or could do, or vice versa?
Well, I think we're trying to get our energy efficiency programs up and running in Kansas. I think that's really the biggest difference. I think they all have different attributes, tax, environment, those sorts of things. Both states are very competitive. I think if you look at the Midwest, they really, I think they really stack up pretty evenly in our minds. So I don't really think I have anything to offer on that right now, but we're using EDRs on both sides of the state line, and our revenue justification policy also is being used on, on both Kansas and Missouri.
All right. Just to clarify, and I think the answer is yes, but Rob, the smart energy plan, that's Ameren's new plan, correct? It's not a statewide thing or a different nomenclature. It's just an Ameren thing.
Yeah, sorry about that. That pertains to the bill that was passed in 2018, I believe it was. Let me see if I can.
Oh, the one with the EDR on it. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So that is the legislation that was passed in 2018 that allows the EDR as well as other infrastructure build out for the utilities. Great. One last question here, and that is on these bigger facilities we had kind of talked about a little earlier. Are you all looking at localized distributed energy as part of that component to help, or is it simply making sure you have a transformer and substation nearby that can provide them what they need?
Based on what I know and working some of those larger projects, I know that obviously we're looking on how we could actually serve the energy via or through the grid, but we're also looking at wind and solar. So, there's those sources and how we're actually going to, provide the energy that company needs. So, I don't know of anything that's actually different in that regard.
Okay.
I do want to be creative, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think, from an economic development perspective, the high level message is like, making sure that we can answer all of those big site selection factors, looking at, the renewable portfolio over the long term. And then as you start to get into some of those very specific ones, it's a little bit of a kind of a case by case situation.
Okay. Well, I know we're over, and I appreciate your patience and everyone else's. Great information, a lot of detailed information on how the different puzzle pieces are coming together to help Missouri's economy grow. And obviously, I think it goes without saying, especially now, Rob and Lisa, both you individually and your organizations have multiple pieces in that puzzle. And we appreciate all that you do, and especially for being here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Bye. Fantastic. Well, as you heard Rob mention multiple times, the infrastructure as part of economic development is a key component of how communities can attract new businesses. And part of infrastructure, whether